The balance really is in the value, right? Anything when the juice is worth the squeeze, it
Hmm.
is valuable to do it. A lot of these customers are balancing the lift, right? So if we think about the lift to create a process that allows you to do something scalably, more efficiently, more quickly, with more stability, creating that process takes probably just as much time as it does doing a big project
Hmm.
manually without
Right.
the resiliency, without the stability. So they're really invested in ensuring in the stability. I mean, the risk of not doing so is massive. You take down your platform, you do this, you
Hmm.
do that, right? So I'll give you an example of maybe one customer that didn't necessarily um, didn't necessarily follow the process that was established. And they do have an established process. So we gave them a quick reminder, right?
Hmm.
And this was about um, back to your previous question. We've reestablished this process with them about people making changes directly in production, right? Without the proper QAing, without going through the process. So I have a very, very, very large Fortune 500 company that's customer of mine. They have global operations and they've got
Hmm.
one instance and they run all of their CX operations through it. Amir is the largest one, right? So Zendesk has this incredible solution called omni-channel routing. Omni-channel routing allows you to deliver tickets based on skills, based on availability, capacity, intent, sentiment, the whole nine yards, right? It is something that supercharges efficiency, all of your operating metrics. So the Amir team was chomping at the bit to get it.
Hmm.
So the admin said, well, we're going to do it. They didn't say this to Zendesk. Said, we're going to do it. And they got all the specs. They got all the specs for Amir. And so they get it all configured, they set it up, and they push it. And EMEA is hooting and hollering, they're loving it. And EMEA dissolves into chaos.
Oh no.
It was a global change that they made. And although the documentation says it, they didn't quite realize that. So they didn't do any configuration on the EMEA side. And so tickets, like I said earlier, were going into the ether. We're not reaching people. They weren't
Hmm.
able to properly support their customers. So they reached out to us, said, oh my goodness, you broke us. And we said, no, this is exactly what the documentation says it will do. But also, didn't you test it? Didn't you test to make sure that this routing one would work for your AMER group and two
Hmm.
wouldn't have downstream impacts on on the other aspects of your organization? And they had it. So we rolled it back and we worked with them. And I think the learning here is, one, tell your customer success team and your technical account manager when you're making big changes with Zendesk. Believe it or not, we've done it a million times over. And we have the best practices and the recommendations on how to do it. But two, you should be configuring, testing, doing training in your sandboxes. You've got to
Hmm.
configure and QA such large changes to understand the impact that might happen elsewhere. Even if you didn't read the documentation that we have in Zendesk Guide about OCR, you'd see it in real life within that sandbox. And once you've done
And
that,
revert it back.
yeah. Well, and you can do that with Salto, but you can also configure it in Salto, do the testing, do the training, and you don't have to reconfigure it every time you step up, and you don't have to reconfigure it when you pass it over.
Hmm.
And if you missed a step, you can go, oops, and pull it back out. And I think that makes it beautifully simple. These are so impactful to the operations. You know, you can't just push changes directly to production. It doesn't work that way. And so
Hmm.
even when you have SOPs like we just discussed where it says, let's do steps X, Y, and Z, sometimes that human error is challenging and makes it more difficult. So when we have these processes that make it easy for
Hmm.
folks to follow those SOPs, that's where I think the value of Salto really comes in. You're making it easy for them to accelerate the development of their enterprise architecture without the lift that people will cut corners with, which I think is incredibly important and has been really impactful for my customers.
Right.